Wake up to a controlled world. Imagine waking up tomorrow to find someone has decided what you can and cannot do. Questioning that authority is no longer an option. It sounds like the plot of a dystopian thriller, but it's not just fiction. Such systems don't rely solely on force. They thrive on something far more dangerous, the blind obedience of ordinary people. The scariest part? Most don't even notice it happening. Today we'll dive into a phenomenon quietly shaping the world around us: extreme conformity and the fear of standing up to unjust systems. Why do so many people follow even absurd orders? And more importantly, how can we resist before it's too late? From childhood, we're taught that obedience is a virtue. We follow instructions, stick to rules, and questioning orders is seen as disrespect. But is obedience always a strength, or is it sometimes just control dressed up as morality? History shows that the worst atrocities weren't committed only by cruel tyrants, but by everyday people who just followed orders. The Holocaust happened not just because Hitler gave commands, but because thousands of citizens carried them out without hesitation. At the Nuremberg trials, Nazi officers defended themselves with, "I was only doing my job." But does that excuse anything? Psychology offers chilling answers. In 1961, Yale psychologist Stanley Milgram ran an experiment to see how far people would go to obey authority. Volunteers were told they were part of a memory study, playing teachers who punished a learner with electric shocks for wrong answers. The shocks were fake, the learner an actor, but the participants didn't know that. As wrong answers piled up, the shocks grew stronger, and the actor screamed in pain, begged to stop, even pretended to pass out. Yet, when a person in a white coat said, "The experiment must continue," 65% of participants delivered the maximum shock, potentially lethal. These weren't sadists. They were regular people who obeyed because it was required. This experiment reveals a terrifying truth. You don't need to be evil to do cruel things, just convinced that authority knows best. This dynamic still operates today. Unjust laws, censorship disguised as safety, nonsensical rules, they're accepted without pushback because we're conditioned to equate power with morality. But is being a good person about blindly following orders, or is it about knowing when to say no? Why do we obey? To understand why people surrender to authority, let's revisit Milgram. His experiment showed that obedience can override empathy and morality when someone else takes responsibility. Participants said, "I was just doing what I was told." But what stops us from resisting? Another clue comes from Solomon Asch's experiments in the 1950s, which explored how group pressure shapes behavior. Participants were shown lines of different lengths and asked which matched a sample. Everyone else in the room, secretly in on the experiment, gave the wrong answer on purpose. The result? Over 75% of participants went along with the incorrect choice at least once, just to avoid standing out. They'd rather be wrong than alone. This conformity shapes our daily lives. Social media amplifies it, creating echo chambers where the only way to fit in is to echo the crowd. Fear of judgment or rejection silences us, even when we see something wrong. The problem is, this paves the way for abuse. When everyone complies, those in power can impose any rules they want, unchallenged. Control in the modern age. We often picture authoritarianism as dictators backed by armies and repression. But today's control is subtler, operating without overt violence. It hides in a culture of obedience and fear of dissent. Social media, news outlets, and major institutions create an environment where expressing wrong opinions carries risks. A 2021 Cato Institute survey found that 62% of Americans fear sharing their political views openly. This isn't classic dictatorship, it's self-censorship, where people police each other. Bureaucracy plays a role too. Corporate policies, platform guidelines, societal norms. These are tools of suppression. In the past, repression came from soldiers. Now it comes from algorithms and social pressure. The most alarming part is the lack of resistance. Control is sold as safety or order, and people buy in without questioning. But who decides what's acceptable, and why do we agree so easily? Courage against the system. History celebrates those who defied injustice, no matter the cost. In 2013, Edward Snowden exposed the U.S. government's secret surveillance of millions of citizens. He could have stayed silent, living comfortably, but chose truth. The consequence? Accusations of espionage, exile, and loss of citizenship. His story highlights a dilemma. How far are you willing to go for your beliefs? Researcher Rushworth Kidder, in his book Moral Courage, argues that bravery isn't just facing danger, it's enduring social and professional fallout. In a world where cancel culture and online tribunals can ruin reputations over a single post, this fear is real. One misstep, and you could lose your job, friends, or community. But what happens if no one dares to question? Without courage, systems become untouchable. Courage doesn't always have to be epic. During World War II, Danish citizens wore yellow stars in solidarity with Jews, confusing Nazi authorities. This quiet act of defiance helped save thousands of lives. Today, courage might mean challenging an unfair workplace rule, standing up for a colleague being sidelined, or voicing an opinion others avoid. Stanford research shows that even one act of civic bravery inspires others. The more you say no to injustice, the easier it gets. How systems turn authoritarian. Authoritarianism doesn't appear overnight. It's a slow creep, eroding freedom step by step. Historian Timothy Snyder, in On Tyranny, outlines the pattern. First, free speech is curbed, then opponents are silenced, then surveillance ramps up, all under the guise of protecting society. In Nazi Germany, Hitler began in 1933 with censorship, then eliminated rivals, and people adapted to the new normal. In Stalin's USSR, dissent was outlawed first. In Cambodia, Pol Pot convinced people re-education was necessary. There's always an enemy to justify sacrificing liberty. We see similar signs today: growing surveillance, intolerance of dissent, slogans like, "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." These concessions build a world where questioning becomes dangerous. Recognizing these patterns is the first step to stopping them, standing up to the crowd. Why is it so hard to go against the grain? Evolution wired us for it. Psychologists call it the herd effect. Belonging to a group meant safety, while isolation could mean death. Today, this instinct makes us stay quiet, even when we know something's wrong. A stark example is the 1964 murder of Kitty Genovese in New York. Dozens of witnesses heard her screams but did nothing. Why? Each assumed someone else would act, or they feared standing out. Conformity stifles action, but there's hope. Asch's experiment showed that if just one person in the group gives the right answer, conformity plummets. A single voice can spark change. In 1989, East Germany saw small groups protesting for freedom. By November, hundreds of thousands took to the streets, and the Berlin Wall fell. Research confirms that if about 10% of a group firmly backs a new idea, it starts to spread. Change doesn't need a majority, just a few bold souls. How to build courage. Courage isn't something you're born with, it's a skill you develop. Psychologists liken it to a muscle. The more you act on your principles, the stronger it gets. Start small. Refuse to do something you believe is wrong, even if it's minor. Share a different perspective in a meeting. Support someone unfairly criticized. A study in Journal of Social Psychology found that regular acts of moral courage boost confidence in tough decisions by 40%. Another key is independent thinking. Instead of swallowing information whole, ask questions, check facts, explore opposing views, judge based on logic, not crowd pressure. This weakens the herd's grip and lets you act on conviction. Courage is contagious. Stanford studies show that seeing someone stand up to injustice makes others more likely to do the same. One brave act inspires more, creating a ripple effect. History proves it. Small groups of bold people, From East German protesters to civil rights activists, changed the world. What's next? Every time you stay silent agreeing with injustice, you strengthen the system. But every time you say no, you crack its foundation. The fate of society doesn't rest with those in power. It rests with those brave enough to challenge them. The question is, will you be ready when your moment comes? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it. And maybe your small step will start a wave of change.